Hi friends, Caribbean Chess Coach here. Welcome back. In today's video, we'll be looking at how black should deal with the Maroczy bind. This is the Maroczy bind position. The important characteristics of the position are that white's pawns are on e4 and c4, and the c pawn for black has been traded for the d pawn for white. The Maroczy bind is a very common structure in chess and can be reached via various openings, both e4 and d4. Let's take a look. The bind is very popular against the Sicilian. Let's look at a move order that we are accustomed to, the Sicilian Kan. So we first go e4, c5, knight f3, e6. This is the Kan. Today I'm showing it from the white side so we can see how white gets into the Maroczy bind. d4, we take on d4, knight takes d4, and we usually play a6, white goes c4 here, and we have the bind. The c pawn was traded for the d pawn, and white's pawns are both c4 and e4. We can go back and look at another Sicilian line. e4, c5, knight f3. Here, the accelerated dragon with g6, d4, and we get the c pawn being traded for the d pawn. And after the move knight c6, c4 with the same bind on the d5 square. Little history about the Maroczy bind. The Maroczy bind got its name from Grandmaster Giza Maroczy. Now we have seen the Maroczy against the Sicilian. Let's see it out of a d4 opening. So here, white goes d4, knight f6, and we get the Nimzo Indian coming up. Bishop b4, queen c2, and black plays the c5 variation here. Now d takes c5, and now white trades the d pawn for the c pawn. Black does not recapture immediately. Black castles. White puts the pawn on e4, one of the characteristics. After the move knight c6, white goes knight f3, and now the c pawn has been recaptured, and we have the Maroczy bind structure. The pawn on e4 and c4, and the d pawn being traded for the c pawn. Now we have seen how the Maroczy structure arises. Let's try to understand why white tries to play the Maroczy structure. e4, c5, knight f3, and we use the Kan move order. c4. The idea of c4 is to bind on the d5 square, as d5 is a very important square in the Sicilian. d5 is the main pawn break. If d5 is not accomplished, then the d pawn will remain backward. White gains space, and what we know about space restricts the side that is lacking space and provides more mobility and flexibility for the side that has the advantage in space. This move c4 has one main drawback. This is a pawn move in the opening that does not prepare piece development. Hence, is a huge investment in time, and black should use this fact to strike before white consolidates the position with piece development. The main theoretical move here is knight f6, striking at the center. We know e5 is not playable, as it met with queen a5, and then queen takes e5. Let's show e5, queen e5 check. Any move to block is met with queen takes e5. So after knight f6 to move knight c3. There is also bishop d3. Let's look at knight c3 first. Bishop b4. No, this is still striking at the center because now we're hitting the defenders of the center. Here there are many options. Let's go with the move e5 first, the most challenging variation. This move we met with knight e4, attacking the pin piece. The most forcing line is queen g4, attacking g7, and knight on e4. The best is move knight takes c3, and white's best is a3. If b takes, then bishop takes c3, forking the rook and the king. So a3 is best, and they move bishop f8, simply guarding g7, and when white recaptures, white has a lot of structural weaknesses, and also the e5 pawn is overextended. Black is better here. We played b6, take, and the intermezzo e5, hitting the queen, knight f5, g6, attacking the pin piece. The queen goes to e4, because if black takes on f5, and queen takes e5, show forks the rook and the king. So knight c6, simply guarding the e5 pawn. Knight g3, saving the knight, and bishop takes d6. Black holds the advantage based on the superior structure. If you were to go back, here we have the move queen d3, or queen f3 was possible with the same idea. But queen d3, we put more pressure on the pin piece. We move queen a5. If white takes on e4, we take on c3. And if we know if b takes, then queen takes c3. Forks the rook and the king. So the move king d1 must be played. Bishop takes d4, saving the bishop from the attack with tempi. Queen takes, and now knight c6. Black is better, as the e5 pawn here is soft. Going back, after we move bishop b4, if white goes simply f3, guarding the e4 pawn, we go queen c7, not allowing the e5 pawn push. They play bishop e3, we simply castle, rook c1, and the main point of our piece setup is to play d5, breaking the shackles as early as possible. If you take a look, all of our pieces were set up to prepare d5. The knight on f6 guards e5. The queen on c7 indirectly looks at the knight, which guards d5. So tactically we prepare d5. The bishop on b4 attacks the knight that guards the d5 square. This is the point of black's piece setup. Going back, there's the move knight c2. Here, not to lose any tempo, we just trade on c3, weakening white structure. Queen a5, guarding e5, and also taking a look at c3. Queen d3, trying to hold the position together. Knight c6, simply developing. Bishop a3, and queen e5. We put in pressure on white's position. White has to make a concession with the move f3, and then again we hit with the move d5. Finally, we go for the best move in this position by white. The move bishop d3. Simply solidifying the e4 point. Now, here we play queen c7. Simply guarding the e5 square as the bishop on d3 takes away any knight jumps with knight e4. So we don't have this resource like in other variations. So after the move queen c7, white has two main options, castling or the move bishop e3. We'll look at the move castle first. Castle, we play knight c6, simply attacking the hanging knight on d4, as we would have seen in other variations. Once the knight is hanging, we generally play knight c6, attacking it. If knight takes c6, we know taking back the d pawn is usually best. f4, and to prevent the move e5, the strategic threat, we play e5 ourselves. For f5, the move h5. Now the idea is that all the dark squares around white's king are weak, so we intend to infiltrate, remove bishop c5, knight g4, queen b6 in some variations, and play along the dark squares. h3, trying to stop knight g4, does not work. We just play bishop c5, king h1, knight g4. And black is great here. We'll see some games with similar variations. Going back, instead of castle, bishop e3. Here, we just chop on c3. Weakening white's pawn structure. After they recapture, we are lacking a dark square bishop. So to make sure, we're lacking a dark square bishop. The correct strategic plan is to put the pawns on the color squares of the bishop you are lacking. So we go d6, and they castle, knight d7, f4, knight c5, playing against their central position. And if they go e5, we don't help their position by capturing on e5, as the f file will become open, half open. We go knight fd7, they're approximately equal position. If we look at the central structure, there are a lot of pawns on the board. Therefore, the diagonals for the bishops are not completely open. So the knights have good solid squares, so they will be able to match the power of the bishops. Going back, if white chooses to stay flexible with the move bishop d3, we go knight c6. With no fear of e5, as we have the resource queen a5. So if knight takes c6, d takes. If castle, we just play e5. And black has a great position. We have solved our light square bishop. We have control over the weak d4 square for white. And we'll simply finish our development coherently. The immediate c4 on move 5 is not the best way for white to create pressure against black, as black has an easy time of neutralizing white structure. The best way for white to reach the Maroczy bind is via this move order: e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d, knight takes d4, a6, and the flexible bishop b3. Instead of the committal c4 immediately. We know usually when the queen's connection is broken from the defense of the knight, the correct move usually is knight c6. But in this exact position, knight c6 is a strategic blunder, as white has a maneuver to punish this move order. White has flexibility with the knight on b1, as it has not committed itself to c3, and it's because of this flexibility that white is able to punish black's move order if black plays the immediate knight c6. Let's look at the variations if black plays knight c6 at this exact moment. Knight c6, white captures, not losing any tempi. D takes, as we know, this takes away one of the pawns from the diagonal, blocking our bishop. And then now, white plays the move knight d2. An excellent move here. Our typical move here is the move e5, simply trying to solve our light square bishop. White continues flexibly with the move castle. We develop naturally with the move knight f6. And now, knight c4, the maneuver. White gains tempi from the e5 pawn. Black now has to commit the queen to c7, or try to go tactically with bishop g4. Let's look at the deciding bishop g4 first. White plays queen e1. Now, if you don't want to play queen c7, which would run us into some problems, we must play knight d7 to guard the e5 pawn, or bishop d6. But then we allow the trade of white's knight for our dark square bishop, and we give the bishop here. So knight d7. But this move has a main drawback, as we're neglecting development. So white goes f4, trying to punish our lack of development by the direct attack. If we go bishop c5, instead we play king h1, and to relieve the pressure, if we go e takes f4, we go bishop takes, we castle, and they want to come through the center as quickly as possible with e5, intending a quick e6, where black's development is not harmonious. Bishop h5, e6, knight f6, and bishop g5. And white is creating significant pressure against black's position. White is clearly better here. Going back, if we go with the solid move here, queen c7, white has the excellent move bishop b2 with the threat of bishop a5, knight b6. And this will kill this rook on a8. Or white will get the bishop here with knight b6 forking. Let's look at the move bishop e6, trying to avoid the loss of the bishop here. We get the same bishop a5. Now, the queen now is forced back to b8 to guard e5. And now look how clumsy black's development is. White's position is clearly better. So if b5, trying to avoid the clumsy nature of black's development and gains some tempo, bishop a5 snags the bishop here. After queen b8, knight b6, rook a7. At least now on a7, the rook can possibly come to the d file. White just takes the bishop here, queen takes c8, a4, attacking the overextension, also breaking down the light square chain on the queen side, as white has a bishop with no counterpart on the light squares. So this is where white is dominant. Rook d7, a takes, opening up lines on the queen side. As white has better development, white should continue to open the position. Queen f3, simply connecting the rooks. Black tries to get developed. White plays bishop c3, just clearing the a file. Castle, rook a2 with the intention of doubling on the a file and penetrating into black's position. Rook b7, rook fa1. And now penetration looms along the a file. Going back to the very beginning, this is why after solid and flexible bishop d3, knight f6 is the most accurate move. Knight e5 is just bad because after queen a5, we will simply pick up the e5 pawn. If white simply castles, then now the strategic threat is e5, as we no longer have the queen a5 resource, so we must now play queen c7. The move queen e2 is best here. Let's see what happens if white plays sidelines. On the move c4, now we can play the move knight c6, exploiting the hanging knight on d4, as now knight d2, knight c4 is not possible to bother us. Knight c6, knight takes c6, d takes c6. If queen e2 now, we just play e5, preventing e5 by white. Going back, if instead of queen e2, white goes for the aggressive f4, intending e5, we block with e5 ourselves. If they go f5, we must recognize that there's no longer tension in the center is closed, and the black king is quite safe in the center. We can attack on the wing here and exploit white's weakened direct squares with the move bishop c5 check, king h1, and a concept we have already seen before, h5, and then knight g4, and ideas like queen b6, simply infiltrating on the direct squares and creating threats. Let's go back one more time. After the move queen c7 in this position, white can also try the passive king h1. Generally, knight c6 is good, and here it is good. But we can also play the move bishop c5, exploiting the fact that the f2 pawn is somewhat soft now. The king has left the diagonal, and white has to go back with the knight, with knight b3. Here, if bishop e3, trying to guard the knight, we have the move h5, as knight g4 is a serious threat. On h3, the move knight g4 is still possible, and the move f3, we get to play the move d5, and black is better. Black has good development, white has made some serious concessions, and black can look to the future greatly. After the move bishop c5, knight b3, kicking back our bishop, but what have we gained? We gained the fact that the knight has left the center of the board, where it was much stronger than on b3. We go back bishop e7, f4, trying to play e5. Now e5 here would be a strategic mistake for black, as the d5 square is left significantly weaker, as we don't have a pawn on c6 generally when we play e5. So we play the move d6. A defensive move, but a necessary one. If knight c3, we just go knight c6 and we get the typical hedgehog structure. And black is okay. The position is roughly equal. Both sides have their play. Let's now look at the main line queen e2. So going back to this position, after queen c7, we move queen e2, insisting on playing the move e5. Here we play d6, guarding the e5 square. If they go c4, we play the move g6, the modern interpretation of this variation. After the move c4 on move 8, we will play the move g6. This is the modern interpretation of this variation. In the past, black was going for a setup with bishop e7 and castle, then making the maneuver rook e8, bishop f8, g6, and then placing the bishop on g7. In the modern treatment of this position, black places the bishop on g7 without investing tempi with moves such as bishop e7 and f8. So here we're going to play the move g6. White goes knight c3. We put the bishop on g7. At this point, white is at a crossroad. White has many setups here, and black should understand how to handle each of them. White can go for a very classical setup. If they move bishop e3, pawn to f3, rook fd1, rook c1, and then they move b4. This is classical piece development, strong and coherent development. But black has enough counterplay here. Another way of playing, generally adopted by very strong players, another way of playing is the piece setup with knight f3, bishop f4, and rook d1, with the intention of targeting the d6 pawn. Let's take an overview of how to handle each of these variations and the intricacies of the move orders. Let's first start with move 10, knight f3. Here, black should castle, but it goes bishop f4 immediately. We play knight h5, dislodging the bishop from its strong post. If the bishop goes back to g3, we just snap it off with knight takes g3. So the bishop generally goes to e3. And here, we play the paradoxical bishop takes c3, giving our strong dark square bishop. The point of this variation is to saddle white with many weaknesses in e4, c3, c4, and a2. We can see this in the game Grishuk, Ivanchuk. Here, let's go back. There's knight f3. White can choose different follow-ups after this move. So we go knight f3 once more. We castle. Now if the bishop goes to f4, we play knight h5. And then they change with the move bishop g5. But this does not affect our plan. We just play bishop takes c3, pawn takes, and we get back the same type of position. So one more variation in knight f3 line. Let's say for instance they go knight f3, we castle, they go rook d1 and not committing the bishop to f4. We play knight c6, gaining control over the weak d4 square. They go h3. We'll understand the point of h3 when we look at another variation. But I can say here, the point here is to stop the bishop from going to g4, then we follow it with e5. We'll discuss this later. We play knight d7, opening the diagonal for the bishop. If we go bishop f4, we take on c3, take, and we get this position. Our game example will be the example Carryakin, even check. Now let's take a look at the move rook d1. We castle, they go knight f3, we go knight c6, they play h3, knight d7, and the bishop goes to e3, we just capture, take, and our plan generally in these variations is just to take on c3 and weaken the structure. So we see the same plan running through all these variations. Let's look at another interpretation of move rook d1. Rook d1, you should know by now castle, knight f3, knight c6, bishop f4, trailing the sights on d6, and this is why they generally play h3 first, because now we have the strong move e5, and bishop goes to e3, then bishop g4. Now pinning the knight that guards the weak d4 square. The main line is not rook d1 nor knight f3, but the move bishop e3. We just castle, rook a to c1, we go knight d7, they go rook f d1, we play b6, simply putting the bishop on the diagonal, f3, overprotecting the e4 square, common term coined by Nimzovich, bishop b7, queen f2, white is targeting b6, we go rook a c8, bishop f1, and the strange looking move queen b8. But we'll discuss why this move is very important in our analysis of the game Uribe Zapata. Queen b8, they expand on the queen side with b4, we play rook e8. This is known as the mysterious rook move, where we're putting the rook on a closed file, but black has a particular plan in mind. Knight b3, and this is the end of our analysis section. We'll look at games to further understand the moves. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to pass them on in the comments below. I will be happy to answer any questions. If you like the video or found it informative, do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you. See you next time as we continue to build your Kan repertoire.